Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our webinar for today is called When Should I Turn on Copilot? We are Spindustry and we've been in the business for 25 plus years, and along with our SharePoint work, we provide several other services. The link to the recordings and the slides will be sent out to you after the webinar. If you have any questions during today's amazing webinar, you can use the questions feature and we'll get to those at the end. My contact information will also be on the last slide of the slide deck, so if you have any questions we don't get to, please don't hesitate to reach out. Besides today's webinar, we have lots of others that are free and easy to access. You can find those on spindustry.com/webinars. My name is Kelsey Culbertson and I'll be your host for today. And with me, I have Tavon Graham, who is our Senior SharePoint Developer, and Jared Edge, who is our Director of SharePoint Services. I'm going to turn it over to them to tell us what we'll talk about today.
Welcome, everyone. I did the biggest thing that I needed to do in this webinar, and that is remember to come off of mute so that I could talk. So now that I'm past that, everything should go just perfect, just like all webinars go. Today, we are talking about AI governance and how AI fits into the puzzle and trying to help you figure out when you should turn this on. So what you're going to hear us discuss inside of here is really the basics of AI governance, but also know that we've done so many webinars on this already that we have more in-depth information. We'll show you which webinars we've had in the past. We'll show that at the end in the slide. But we're also going to you hear us discuss how Copilot AI interacts with your data and your documents, very important, and how information around data classification and data retention is also very important to you. We'll also try to point out any red flags along the way that we see with turning on Copilot right away or even not turning on Copilot right away. And then we'll talk about those big, gigantic, huge benefits for Copilot for turning on Copilot AI. We know that we all want to get to this point. You probably wouldn't be in this webinar if you weren't on one side of the fence. So either you are at the side of the fence where you know that there's some things you need to do before you turn it on, or you're at the other side of the fence saying, I want to turn it on right now. I want to turn it on right now. I want to turn it on right now. Let me just double check, right? And so either you're in one of those or you're just right in between. So we hope that this kind of reaches out to everyone. We're also going to do some demos. So we've done plenty of AI demos in the past. So we have, again, lots of webinars. You can go look for some of the more basic things. I don't want to assume that everyone here has worked with AI or knows everything about AI or has even turned on or looked at Copilot yet. So we're going to do a couple of practical examples, but then we'll also jump into some of the newer technology because all year you've been hearing about agents, right? And so we're going to talk about Copilot Studio, some Copilot agents, and also SharePoint agents as well, and just try to show you what the low-hanging fruit from those items actually is. So buckle up, get ready to go, and let's jump right into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jared. So, like you said, we've done some other webinars on Copilot, but if this is a Copilot webinar, I don't really want to skip over, what Copilot is. We might have some new folks in here. So, can you guys really quickly give us a rundown of what Copilot is?
Yeah, we absolutely can. So to answer the question, really what is Copilot? I think there's a few approaches you can take. Microsoft, of course, has their definition here, which is a little bit businessy, a little filled with buzzwords, but they basically say Copilot combines the power of large language models, AI, with your organization's data, all in the flow of work to turn your words into a powerful productivity tool and work alongside you in all your favorite Microsoft apps like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. I think the way that I would approach kind of answering, really what is Copilot would be to focus on that last part of what I just said there, that it lives inside of and works with you in the places where you're already doing your job, right? And that's where the name Copilot kind of comes from. It's not something meant to replace you or take over what you do or anything like that. It's really just meant to be an extra tool in your arsenal while you're doing things that you always do, like hosting meetings. Maybe you need to send out a after meeting recap or have something help you take your notes and give you action items. Maybe you're sending over an email to somebody and you think, yeah, did I word this right? I need somebody to proofread this for me and help me make sure it makes sense. Maybe you're working on a PowerPoint presentation that you're trying to turn something like a Word document into a presentation format so it's more digestible. That is Copilot. It's the tool that helps you do all of those things in a very, friendly chat-based interface like we're all used to seeing with AI on all sorts of different websites and tools these days.
Yep. And I think the only thing I would add to that is the way I look at it, it's my personal assistant. My CFO won't give me the money, the dollars that I want to go out and hire an assistant. So I just have Copilot, and Copilot's my personal assistant. Copilot types way better than I do. And so for just to ask it to do something for me and it gives it back, that's super awesome. But I also want you to know that Microsoft didn't just say, they're not just out there saying turn it on, turn it on, turn it on today for any reason. They actually are giving you some help as well. So there's a Copilot Success Kit that is sitting out there. I'm giving you the link to that, so that'll be in this slide deck when you get it. And it goes through all these things that you're talking about that you're seeing here on the screen. Things like how to onboard users, what do I give to my stakeholders so that they understand what's really going on here. How do I convince people that we're ready to turn on, or how do I check to make sure that we're ready to turn it on as well. We are going to go over some things that I don't see in that whole scope of what Microsoft has, because there are some things that I would say that maybe they wouldn't say because they really want you to turn it on. And so we're going to go through some of those today, the things that maybe they wouldn't say out loud to you. So let's kind of jump into some of those items. So you want to make it, your Copilot, right? Or Copilots, and we'll kind of get the definition of what that is as we go forward. But in reality, again, there are people here, and I don't want to just take it for granted that you're here for the same reason we think you are. But there are people who are here who are like, well, I'm just going to put a blanket policy out there, and we're just going to turn on Copilot, and the blanket policy will just simply say, hey. Don't do crazy things like put our documents into the AI, right? It may just say something like that. And it's just like, be smart about it, right? And we have some clients that have done that. And then we have other clients that are like, no, we need an AI council. We have a very defined thing. We want to have a training plan in place. We want to have all these different things. We have a checklist that we're going through to make sure that everything is checked off and we've done all the different things. So we have some of you at one end of that and some of you at the other end of that, right? And then there are those who are in between, like looking for what is it I have to get done before I turn it on. That's what we're kind of here to discuss today. And we're going to talk about all those different things. Some of them must-haves, some of them better to-dos, right? So Tavon, let's kind of jump into some of that, or Kelsey, kind of take us in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Jared was just talking about, we kind of need to pause and wait, like this slide says, before we just turn everything on and call it good. There's a bunch of different things that you need to make sure you're considering, no matter kind of what approach you take. So, yeah, Jared and Tavon are going to walk through a bunch of different things that are important to consider before you just flip on Copilot.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
first
And I
thing,
think it's important to take that pause because we've all heard the stories of, oh, we just turned on Copilot and things started going crazy. People were seeing stuff they shouldn't see, or, nobody knew how to use it. We're going to talk through how to kind of address all of those concerns here as we go. So we've got a few things that we think are going to be important for you to consider.
So the first thing we did is say, let's just ask Copilot what its thoughts are. And you'll have this slide so you can kind of read all the way through it. And so the first problem that I had when I went and asked Tavon, or asked, not Tavon, asked Copilot this, is that it misunderstood what I was talking about because of the name change to Office 365 or Microsoft 365. When they renamed it Microsoft 365 Copilot, now all the answers that I got back when I asked this simple question about turning on Copilot, they were all about how to set up a tenant in Office 3 or in Microsoft 365. And I was like, uh-oh, that's not good for Microsoft. But I did, give it some better prompts, worked with it for a while and got it to where I wanted an answer. And you'll see some of the things it talks about. Hey, look at license compatibility. Hey, look at review your permissions and policies. That's very important. We're going to mention that in ours as well. Enable required features. Okay, well, that sounds great. But some of those things that they mention in there, you don't even know what they are. Like WebSockets, most of us don't even know what a WebSocket is or what's an endpoint, right? Those types of things. And then implement security measures. Again, always important. Prepare your network. Well, I mean, it's in the cloud. I thought you were handling the network, and then do some training, also important. So it gave us some answers, but I think there's some things that are fundamentally missing on here, and they're just simple governance, right? And so we're going to talk about and break down the key things that we think you need to know and that you need to consider before turning this on. And here it is. So Tavon, I'll start out maybe talking about location, and then you maybe can jump in after that. So we think that location of documents, location, how you structured out your SharePoint, we think that's very important. not just for AI, for the AI piece of this, but just for in general to help with other things that we're going to talk about. So let me just talk about this for just a brief second, right? Let's just take HR as my example, and let's say HR has a site collection. Where is HR going to put documents? Where are they going to put their library so they can put in documents, right? So if they just had one site, then it may be very complicated for them to be able to say these two libraries on this one site everyone should see, this one library on this one site maybe no one should see, right? And so it's very hard for them to be able to do that and keep track of it. I want to build an environment that gives them locations that we know exactly what should be on there. So for example, maybe I give them a public site that they can put information on there. Whatever they put on there is going to be seen by the whole organization. At least the user putting the information there knows that, right? And we know that because everyone in the company can see it, guess who else can see it? Copilot, right? So then I might have a private site for them as well that says, hey, whatever you put on here, only the HR team will be able to see. That sounds super, right? They know that if they put something there, no one else in the organization will see it outside of the HR team. Guess who else can see it? Copilot, if Copilot's working on their behalf. So I work in the HR department. I can see those things in that private site. Tavon doesn't work in the HR department. He won't be able to see those, and neither will Copilot, right? So I'm giving them these designated locations to help with things like security, but also to help with things like retention and also sensitivity of documents and all the other things that go along with it. So you'll hear us repeat this over and over. But they might also have a training site, like we have in some of our examples. And in that training site, maybe also they want everyone to get to it. Or maybe it's a manager's training site, but they know that they put the information there, it's about training, and if they put it there, then maybe the retention cycles are the same for that. And if they put it there, maybe the sensitivity label, that's all the same, and so forth, right? So location, 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 always important. They may also have stuff out on Teams, and I might want to consider the same things that we're going to talk about as well for the Teams location that they have. So the location of documents is going to become important, but it's going to become important in the context of all the different things that we're going to talk about. All right, so hopefully that makes sense for you. Go ahead, Tavon.
And let me expand that bubble a little bit further, even just beyond the regular Microsoft space. We've worked with many clients over the years who say, "Oh, well, we've got a lot of stuff on our desktops," or "Oh, we've got this one shared drive we want to make sure we hold on to." "Oh, I've got my stuff stored in Google Drive. I've got my stuff over in Dropbox." That location is also important to think about, because if you go back to that definition of what Copilot is intended to be, that wonderful tool that works alongside you in your Microsoft environment, it's worth really thinking about where your documents live overall. Are they in the Microsoft space? If not, do we have some way for Copilot to connect to them? That's going to be important to make sure that it's always seeing the relevant information for you and not missing anything. For example, policies are so often stored in some other policy management software. Maybe we want to be able to ask Copilot about our policies too.
Yep, that's super awesome. And even the case of policies could be the HR holds onto theirs, IT holds onto theirs, and finance holds onto theirs. But we want Copilot to be able to make a conversation or have a conversation about policies. Where are they located, right? So location is going to become important in any aspect of it. What we're saying here is plan out the structure of your SharePoint environment. Then the conversation is going to turn to content types. Tavon?
All right, so content types. If you've ever talked to us before, you'll probably know that we think content types are pretty important stuff. We would probably consider them about the second most important thing for a successful SharePoint journey overall, just behind the core idea of having governance discussions and having a plan for SharePoint. That's how important these are. If you aren't familiar with the idea of a content type, to kind of answer, what is it? You can just flip those words around. It's the type of content, right? It's a way that we can tell SharePoint this isn't just a PDF. This is actually a policy. This isn't just a random Excel document. It actually is a report. This isn't just some Word document I have sitting out there. It's a SOP. And that's really valuable to a lot of what you end up wanting to do in SharePoint itself, right? If you've ever gone out and you've done a search in SharePoint using just its lovely built-in search where it pulls you to that nice white page and you can filter down by a couple of different options, wouldn't it be nice if instead of just being able to say, "Oh, I want Word documents," you could say, "Hey, I'm actually interested in policies," whether it was a Word document, a PDF, or for some reason just an image that somebody uploaded. Wouldn't it be nice if you could, excuse me, automate off of these content types and the types of documents you have as well. For things like, hey, I want to go out and run a report on, the permissions that people have to our policies wherever they happen to live in our environment. Great, if we could target things that are just kind of classified as a policy, that makes that 10 times easier than having to guess just based on their location or based on, the name of the file, because we might miss something if we're just going off of file names. We're going to talk more about retention and sensitivity in just a few minutes here, but these content types and being able to tell the system the nature of a document also becomes really important when it comes to having it help you keep your documents and your information for as long as you need to keep them and secure them in ways that permissions can't do for you. On top of all that, tying this back into Copilot, right, we've kind of hinted at it, but the way that Copilot really likes to work is it likes to work off of search. And I just mentioned how helpful these content types can be for searchability, so that means they're going to be helpful for Copilot too. Do you want to expand on that, Eddie?
Yeah, so I think for those who are new, to recap the basic of that before I tell you this, and that is simply that content type doesn't matter whether it's a Word document, Excel document, PDF. It's the type of information that's in that document, and that becomes important to Copilot and to SharePoint and just to searchability in general. But if you're going to go implement this, you need to plan first, then implement, right? So some of you already have a SharePoint environment. I would recommend to you, hey, take a step back, talk about content types and see how you can now integrate them into your environment. If you're new to SharePoint and you're just getting at that starting level, I say you plan out the content types first and then you implement, because content types might weigh into the location of information as well. Do I have one library that has, 15,000 folders inside of it, and 15,000 documents inside of it, right? Do I have that? Or have I split my libraries apart so they make sense for content types? So I have the same type of content in each library, making it then easier for me to do retention, sensitivity, security, some of the other things that are going to be on top of that as well. So again, at the base of it, if you're brand new to content types, it's just what is the type of content that's inside of a document. But if you're going to try to implement it, we expect you to first plan it and then implement it. And you see the test library that we have there, the screenshot, where everything inside of this library is an SOP. Yes, I could say it's good enough just to have the word SOP there for the library name. But really what I want is, as those documents are being discovered by search or by all the other things that Tavon talked about, that it sees the content type on it, which is SOP, which you see in that last column over here. Okay, so those are all important things. But there is one more thing that could help someone out if they were struggling with, how do I implement content types? How do I implement the next thing we're going to talk about, manage metadata, those types of things? There is something that Microsoft introduced for that. Tavon, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, we'll just briefly mention this. It's a big enough topic that probably deserves its own full discussion. We don't have any webinars on it yet, but maybe in the future. And this is a tool called Syntax, or SharePoint Advanced Management, or SharePoint Premium. There's a few different kind of things that are very similar. But the idea of Syntax is it's something that's intended to help you manage your SharePoint environment, help you make sure documents get classified correctly, tagged correctly, have the right content types on them, and give you some more pretty awesome controls for managing your SharePoint environment overall as well. Again, probably deserves its own full discussion, so we won't go into too much detail there, but definitely something to look at if you have those thoughts about how difficult this might be for you to implement.
Yeah, and I think the big reason that we added in here as well is because it also uses AI. So keep that in mind. All right, so let's talk about metadata.
All right, perfect. So everyone in here, whether you know it or not, you are familiar with the idea behind metadata. Metadata just means information about information or data about your data. The way that I would kind of relate this to people who aren't familiar with SharePoint and its columns, think about your folders, right? You've all used a folder structure at some point in your life. Maybe you've got a top level folder sitting on some network share for HR. Maybe inside of that, you have folders for the different major topics that HR works on, like a policies folder, a benefits folder, a hiring folder. And inside of those, you have further broken apart subfolders, like maybe one for each department that you're hiring people into. What you're really doing with that folder structure is you're presenting some information about the documents and the data that live in Well, that folder, right? In the HR folder, we know everything's related to HR. In the hiring folder, we know it's all related to hiring people. In the IT subfolder, that we know it's all related to hiring for IT. That is the idea of metadata, presenting that information about your files. SharePoint has this wonderful power of columns that we can apply to our libraries, where we don't necessarily have to use folders to do all of that. Right? What you can see in this screenshot right here is we have a column here called Spin 23 Department. And in that, you'll find we have human resources, IT, marketing, just those different kind of tags or labels in a way that you want to apply to your documents. We can have just about as many of these as we want, but the core idea there is the same as those folders. But now instead of having to dig through however many layers of folders, I can just see at a glance, oh, marketing. I can see at a glance, oh, IT. Or, and this is an extremely powerful thing, maybe today I want to look at this data differently. Maybe today I don't like the way that we have it grouped. I don't like the way that we had it structured. Maybe today I want to filter it differently, sort it differently, group it into some other grouping that nobody else would have thought of. Well, with your folder structures, that's a very rigid thing, right? It's just kind of set in stone. Inside the HR folder, there's this other folder. Inside that, there's another folder. With this kind of metadata and column-based approach, your data becomes a lot more flexible to look at and present and interact with in the way that you want to without actually messing things up for anybody else. So we think metadata is another one of these really important pieces of the puzzle for you to grow into in your SharePoint journey.
And I think that's, metadata itself is very helpful. But what I want to talk about is managed metadata. So that column that you see there is the Spin 23 department, right? So what I don't want is when someone enters in the information to that column, like human resources, that I have one person in there who puts HR, another person puts people services, and another person puts human resources, because now they're calling human resources different things, and that doesn't have any consistency in there. I don't want one row that says information technology and the next row says IT, because the searchability of that goes down. I have to search for IT or information technology. What managed metadata allows you to do is create sets of terms. We call them term sets. So we refer to that as managed metadata term sets. You'll see all of that information over in that blue segment there on the slide. But inside of there, what I'm allowed to do is not only maintain list of my data or sets of terms, I can also put aliases for them. So I could say human resources also means people services. It also means HR, right? And so when someone goes to this list and they enter in HR, it converts that to human resources. That is going to increase the searchability of my environment. So search is going to benefit from that. The fact that I have the right keywords inside of there, that's going to benefit from that. But also Copilot is going to leverage that and start to understand that data as well. It understands now that HR really means people services here, right? So that's important to be able to have in your environment. So location is important. Content types are important for many different things. And then also metadata is important as well. But if I didn't do metadata, Tavon, would I still be okay for turning on Copilot if I didn't leverage metadata?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's kind of based on a powerful search behind the scenes, so it can still find content, but why not help Copilot out as much as we can, right?
All
Why
right,
not give ourselves the best experience and the best odds of finding what we're looking for?
cool. And that's what we're saying there. Okay. So hopefully you got that piece. Let's go to talk about retention.
All right. Retention, this is also an idea many of you are familiar with, but I don't want to assume everyone knows about it. So retention is just this practice of considering how long should we keep our content, how should we get rid of it, should we archive it, just delete it, what should happen after it's no longer relevant. Microsoft has this great recommendation of a approach called data minimization. What that really means is we've found out this document is old. It no longer is relevant, no longer important. We're not required to keep it legally. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. That way, your environment is clean, right? You don't have a lot of old data that nobody really needs to see getting in your way. Um, and you can actually kind of help yourself save on things like storage costs that way as well. It's also important from a legal perspective, right? A lot of organizations will come to us and say, hey, we need to figure out a way to get rid of this old data, so if we have a legal request come in, we don't have the data there to present back, right? Retention and automating retention can help you keep things for as long as they should be there, then get rid of them or even archive them. And that's really
So
important, not just for you as users, but also to keep Copilot aware of fresh, real data.
So I think all that's super important. And I'll just give the case of, like, say, policies. So there's this policy that's been around for 10 years. Last year we changed it to a brand new policy. So it's a brand new document even that we put out there, right? But when I go to ask the question to Copilot, or even search, which policy does it find if that old document is still sitting here? Does it say, oh, I'm going to look at the date that it was created and just say, oh, I'm going to assume that this one's the new policy? Or does it look at how many times a document's been accessed? And I guarantee that over the last 10 years, that document, that old one, has been accessed more than the new one, right? And so what is it doing in the background? It's working kind of the same way search works. And you know that when we all do searches, we each get kind of slightly different answers. So I'd like Copilot to recognize, or sorry, the retention mechanism here to recognize that, oh, hey, that document doesn't need to be here, that old policy. Let's go ahead and move it to an archive. And then, Talon, if I moved it to an archive, how do I make it so that that archive, which could be another SharePoint site or another library inside of SharePoint, how do I make sure that that one doesn't show up in the Copilot answer?
Well, there's this great setting we can use to say, hey, search, just don't index this library. Don't index this site. And because Copilot works off a search, it won't find it there.
Awesome. So that's fantastic, right? And that's great. So now we have the concept of that. But Jared, how do I actually implement this retention stuff? I didn't even know that we could do retention in the Microsoft 365 environment, right? So all of you are paying for this thing called Microsoft Purview. It is in your environment already. And within Microsoft Purview, there's a section there called data lifecycle management. And inside of there, you would create labels for retention. Like, for example, I have a 7 years retained for 7 years. I have a human resources benefits administration policy that keeps information for, so forth. And that's just, these are the rules that I want to apply. Then I would put those into policies and say, hey, ship these 3 labels over to the human resources department. And then in that particular site that we have, then I'd be able to go in to see the actual policies that are there, and I could set those retention policies or change them. I could even do default policies as well. So I could say, hey, every file that gets placed in this library automatically has this, right? But how would I be able to do that if I didn't have good locations for everything? If I have one library that's mixed with 7 different types of documents in there that needs 7 different types of retention policies, that's different than saying I split my documents up into good locations, so a single library for each content type of thing, and then anything that's content type gets this retention policy. So you can make this next effort that you'll have to go through, retention, you can make that next effort easier if you're doing good things with location, if you're using content types, even if you're managing metadata inside of there. All that's going to apply to retention, and retention is going to help get rid of those documents that don't need to be in the way of Copilot when it's trying to find answers. All right. Tavon, you want to add anything else to that, or should we go to sensitivity?
I think we can jump down to sensitivity.
All right.
All right. So we just mentioned this great tool that you're already paying for called Microsoft Purview. It's again just sitting there. Retention is only one of the things that it can do. The other major side of Purview is this idea of sensitivity. So let me give a little context to what we mean when we say sensitivity for the Microsoft space. You have permissions, right? You might be, I don't know, the manager of an HR department. You have a lot of access to a lot of, what might be considered secure, sensitive information in that HR department. Let's say maybe you have a document that has, I don't know, everyone's social security numbers, home addresses, mother's maiden name, and the 4 digits on their credit card. That's a pretty sensitive document, right? You don't want that getting into the wrong hands. You don't want to accidentally do anything with that you shouldn't be doing. Well, you're the manager of HR. You have full access to that document. If you wanted to download it onto your computer, you can. If you wanted to attach it to an email, you can. What if there was a way for us to have the system say, hey, I've detected that that's a pretty sensitive document. Maybe you shouldn't be emailing that outside the company, and give you a warning. Or even go above giving you a warning and prevent that email from going out altogether. Maybe it's not even something malicious. Maybe you truly meant to attach a less sensitive document, but you clicked on one that really shouldn't be leaving the company. It'd be great if there was a way for SharePoint and Outlook to kind of step in and say, hey, don't do this. Here's a giant warning. You're doing something that doesn't make sense. We're going to prevent you from doing that. That's the idea of sensitivity. It's protection over your permissions. And I think that's going to be a really important thing for you, not just with Copilot, but as you get more and more into your journey down the Microsoft technology as well. Because again, we're human. We make mistakes. We attach things we didn't mean to. It would be a great idea to leverage the tool you already pay for to help prevent that from causing some real damage.
Yeah. Like, how sensitive is this document? Oh, it's internal only. We don't want anybody else to see that. How sensitive is this document? Well, our vendors could see it as well. How sensitive is this document? Well, that's free for public. Public can see that. They can get it off our regular website anyway. How sensitive? It's just going through doing that exercise and then putting that into the environment, right? But there are some special things that you need to consider, because remember Copilot. What can Copilot do for us? Copilot knows how to generate new documents from your old documents. So let me be that same HR manager that Tavon was talking about a second ago. And I'm looking at this internal only document that I have there, and I need to make a PowerPoint presentation about this case, like this use case and all the things that went around with it. So I go to PowerPoint and I say, hey, make a new presentation based on that internal document that I see there. Now, if I'm not using sensitivity in my environment, not using sensitivity labels, PowerPoint will generate that new document for me, and then I can take that new document and place it somewhere. So I went and did my presentation, and I placed it in a place where everybody could get to it who saw the presentation. Maybe it was for upper management, right? Then upper management, someone from there looks at that and says, "Oh yeah, let me send this out as in my email." Well, they could do that because there's nothing stopping them from doing that. And what they really did there was send out a PowerPoint presentation that was generated from an internal only document. That is a problem, right? So what we want is the sensitivity labels. So turn this on. I'll show you how to do it in just a second. So we want the sensitivity labels to stop that whole process. So I do want to be able to, as the HR manager, create a new document using PowerPoint. But if that initial document is marked with a sensitivity label, internal only, Copilot will say, I generated this new document for you, but I noted that some of the information was internal only, so I marked this new document as internal only also. Then later, when that other executive went to email that out of the company, Outlook would stop them and say, hey, this is internal only. You can't send that out. I'm not going to let you send that out. That's what we want, that extra layer of above permissions type of security. So, Jared, how do I do that? I'm so glad you guys asked that question. So Microsoft Purview again, one of the most underutilized tools that we've seen with all of our partners and everybody that we do work for, right? Microsoft Purview. Most people don't even know that it exists there. So we try to inform you that this is there and it's valuable. So inside of there, there's a section for information protection, right? And in the information protection section, you'll see sensitivity labels, right? Like right here. Okay, and then you're going to go through and set up sensitivity labels. So in this particular example, I've got ones for confidential, I've got ones for public, ones for personal, ones for general. I want to try to keep this to a minimum. So let me just mention that real quick. So for content types, I might end up with a couple of hundred content types. That's very possible in any organization. For metadata, lots of metadata all over the place, right? That's also, that's good to go. Retention labels, I might end up with a couple of hundred, maybe even more retention labels, because I've got a lot of different scenarios to cover with retention, right? This one's for 5 years and then get rid of it. This one's for 3 years and then get rid of it. This one's 5 years and then archive it. Don't get rid of it, things like that. But sensitivity labels, I want this to be as minimized as possible. I think most of the organizations that I really listened to on how they implemented their sensitivity labels, they all went after, let's do a minimal approach here because users have to make a big decision here. It's either sensitive or it's not. It's either internal or it's not. It's either okay for public or not. Those types of things. Try to keep it at a minimal respect. Once you get it implemented here and you go ahead and publish those policies with those sensitivity labels in them, then I can apply labels or sensitivity labels to an entire site, to an entire Microsoft team, or to like a library, and I can set up defaults in those libraries if I want to. But a user who's working on a document and has permissions to set the sensitivity label would see this new drop down there, and they'd be able to select what the actual policy is. And it can be as simple as that, right? Also, if you open up like a Word document, you'll see it in there as well. So at the top, you'll be able to say, oh, I can mark this as sensitive. Or in a Outlook email, you'll be able to say, oh, I can change the sensitivity label on this, and your IT department can set up defaults and things like that. That is a conversation that needs to be had. So you definitely need to do some planning around that, but it's not it's not that hard to implement as long as you have some level of planning and that you're willing to accept whatever your license levels are. All right, so let's talk about this last one here, Tavon, security.
All right. So security, I think, is going to be one of the most important things for you to think about when it comes to Copilot. Because again, Copilot, when you're talking to it, it respects the context of that conversation. It respects your context. What it wants to do is it wants to say, hey, pretend I am Tavon today. I'm going to go out and do this search. I'm going to pull all the documents that Tavon can find that are relevant to whatever conversation we're having, whatever other information it finds that I have access to that it thinks is relevant. The core of how I want you to think about security and how it relates to Copilot is think about search. Whatever you can find in search, Copilot can find in search when you're talking to it. And that, excuse me, is why a lot of companies who just turned on Copilot as soon as it became available ended up getting in trouble, because they didn't realize people had access to things that they really shouldn't, because they never did a search for it. They didn't realize that, oh, our permissions are a little messy, because nobody ever did that kind of search to find the information that would answer those questions they shouldn't be answering. But Copilot is a really, really efficient tool when it does that search across your entire environment. So security is only ever becoming more and more important as Copilot gets more and more integrated and ingrained in all the tools that you're going to be using.
And Microsoft even puts out again, they're trying to help us get to where we need to go, right? So there's an article they have in their site, which is apply principles of zero trust to Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 Copilot. Should be on the end of that word as well. So one of the things that's inside it, I put the link here for you guys to have, but one of the things inside of it that I extracted out of that was give just enough access, right? So assign, just the amount of permissions that someone actually needs. Try not to do oversharing. Be cautious of oversharing. Revoke unused permissions, right? So how are you going to do that? You got to commonly check for that, right? Audit who has access to your data regularly, right? Take advantage of sensitivity labels. All those things are super important, but they need to be part of your routine. And if they're not, you're behind the curve, and you need to kind of step up to that to make sure you're doing some of those things before you do and turn on your actual Copilot, because Copilot's going to take advantage of all that stuff, right? And so auditing, super important. Tavon, what do you think about that?
Yeah. Let me zoom in on auditing and why we think it's going to be so important. I'm going to say something Microsoft might not want me to say, but if you've ever been in a SharePoint site, you might notice how incredibly easy, probably too easy, it is to share, right? If you go to a page, there's a share button. If you go to a library, there's a share button. If you hover over a document, there's a share button. Go into a document, about 8 share buttons. And those share buttons do things that a lot of people might not expect. You might think, just as an average user, not too in tune with security, by clicking share, I'm just copying this link. I can put that wherever I want. That depends on your settings, but a lot of times that's not the case. What you've actually done there is you've messed up permissions on that document. Now somebody who got that link might have direct access to that file instead of a clean permission structure that we would, kind of encourage with good permission inheritance. Because of how incredibly easy Microsoft and SharePoint make it to accidentally share or overshare or break permissions without even knowing it, we think auditing is one of the most important things you can be doing for your Microsoft environment. And again, that good security just comes back to getting a good Copilot experience as an organization. So
First of
I would
all,
say, sorry, go ahead.
First of all, Tavon, I can't believe you actually went there, because Microsoft's going to revoke your card. But if we had to add something into that, I would say there's a couple of different ways to do audits. You want to talk about some of those?
Yeah. So one of the most common tools that people might be aware of is just built into SharePoint. There's a check permissions mechanism. You can go to whatever you want to say, I'm going to check the permissions on this. There's also some built-in mechanisms to say, who accessed the site. What have people been doing on this site or in this library? Have people been deleting files? Let me get a report out of that. Purview can do some of that, as well as actual built-in to SharePoint mechanisms. But a lot of times we find that people want to go above and beyond what's built in. They want to get a report that tells them just about the things that are not following their best practices as an organization for security. And that's where one of the more common things that we see organizations want and we help with, security audits and audit scripts, kind of come into play. So definitely think about some of those built-in tools, but also think about, do we need a more customized solution to give us the actual audit that we want to see, not the audit that Microsoft thought we wanted to see?
Yeah. So I think the one thing I'd like to say here, and then I'll leave it alone, is that if you are the owner of documents in your environment, so let's say you're either a site owner or something like that, you're responsible for the pieces of the puzzle that are on your SharePoint. I think you have the right to be able to say who has access to my site right now. I also think you have the right to say who has had access and who has gone into my site over the last 30 days or 40 days or 60 days or whatever it might be, right? And those are questions that you can ask to your IT department and they can provide. They have the tools to do that within Microsoft Purview to be able to say, let's run a report of the HR site and show me anyone who has accessed that site over the last 30 days and run that report and hand it over to the HR department. We find that, entering into SharePoint, a lot of sometimes departments like HR or finance, they are concerned about, like, okay, if I put my stuff on here, how do I know it's safe? And we don't want to just take your word for it. We actually want the proof. IT departments, I would say to you, you have the ability to give the proof. You should just offer that up in front, and then that way you have overcome that hurdle of end user acceptance or department acceptance as well. All right, so I'm going to leave that alone. I know that was a lot. Sorry about that. Okay, so Tavon, if they do all of those things that we just talked about, right? Location, content types, metadata, retention, sensitivity, get the security all in place, get some audits going. If they do all that, are they ready to turn on Copilot?
I would say they're getting close, but they might want to pump the brakes and think about a couple of other really important topics as well. So for example, in that Copilot response we saw earlier, one of the things it brought up, and one thing that I really strongly agree with, is training. Right? You're going to want to make sure that people are well trained on how to use Copilot, but also how do we stay secure in our environment? What are these tools that we've talked about with things like sensitivity and retention? People need to know about that so they can follow good practices and understand what's happening.
And
I
even
feel
just
like training.
simple things like teaching them how to prompt as well is probably a good one to be on everybody's checklist.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of times people go out and they talk to Copilot in a way that doesn't really work for it. So there's kind of an art to using AI, and people need to be trained on that. We also think you should think about licensing. One of the more common questions we'll see from people is, okay, great, how much does this cost? Is it free? Can I go out and use it now? Unfortunately, the Copilot we're talking about, the kind of business oriented Copilot, is definitely not free. It's kind of an expensive addition to your licenses. However, you as an organization will likely see a great return on investment there, but you have to think about, do we have licenses for this now? Who do we want to license for it? Is it something we're giving everyone access to, or just kind of a few people? That licensing structure is something you'll have to discuss as an organization. And then once you've got all that figured out, start thinking about, do we like Copilot as it is? Does it do exactly what we want? Or do we want to customize? Do we want to create these agents, this wonderful new technology where we can kind of control the way Copilot works and give it access to do more things? Do we like default Copilot? Should we change that up at all? Should we build our own chatbots? Should we let it act on our behalf? All new and improving technology that you have to think about as part of your plan for turning on Copilot.
Awesome.
Okay, with all of that, then, I think it sounds like everyone will be ready. If they've gone through all of those steps, they've considered all of those things, everyone is set how it should. I think this means that everyone is ready for Copilot. Can you guys show us, what we can do now that we have Copilot turned on?
Well, before we
I,
get into demos, let me just say you're already looking at something Copilot did, this adorable little green light right here. That was our friend Copilot built that for us, and I love it.
All right. So I'm going to go through just a couple of demos. We want to make it over to some of the hard stuff. So I want to talk about agents because I know that a lot of you came here to see what is an agent and what are the things that go around that. But for those who really haven't worked with Copilot first, let me just show you how we jump in and get inside of there. So inside of my SharePoint environment, of course, I have the waffle over here. And you'll notice the new Microsoft 365 Copilot button, which actually doesn't take you to Copilot, but it is good to click every once in a while. And so when I get over here to the newly renamed environment, Microsoft 365 Copilot, on the left-hand side, I will see a Copilot button, which is kind of nice. that does take me to what I would perceive to be Copilot, because I need to start asking questions. Although what I'm not demoing here is the fact that every tool also has Copilot in it. So if I'm sitting inside of PowerPoint, there's Copilot built into that. If I'm in Microsoft Teams, there's Copilot built into that. If I'm sitting inside of, Microsoft Word or Outlook or Excel, there's Copilot built into that. And you want to use those very specific Copilots to be able to do what you want to do. For example, and I won't try this, I'm going to do a different demo, but let's say I was sitting here at the Copilot here, and I put in a prompt that said, hey, there's a document that I have that's a Word document. Could you make that into a PowerPoint presentation? Well, it will give you an answer, but it'll be like, here's what I think the slides should be. It won't create the presentation for you. But if you go over into PowerPoint and you do that presentation, or you do that same thing from PowerPoint and say, hey, there's a document out there, it's a Word document, make it into a presentation, it'll generate a presentation for you. So you want to be very specific at kind of where you're at when you're doing the actual prompting of Copilot. So inside of here, I have two pieces because I have a license for Copilot. I have work and web. If I did not have a specific license for Copilot, I would just see web sitting here. But I want you to, there's something significant that I should point out here, and that is this shield, this green shield. When I hover over that, it says there's enterprise data protection is enabled here, and it applies to this chat that I'm about to have and the rest of the chats that I would have, right? Feel free to go click on that link and go out. It'll tell you what you're protected for. So the way I interpret that, or way to interpret that, is could I go down here and add a document into this environment, right, and have it protected? Or would that document make its way out to the World Wide Web and all of a sudden everybody has it and other AIs are learning from that and things like that, right? So be aware of those things, but this protection here tells you exactly how you're protected. So I advise you to go look at that. We did some information on that in a previous webinar as well, where we talked about all of it and how to set it up as well. But go look at that so you can see for yourself, what am I protected for, right? So if I do a search for here for something, then it's going to go to basically out to the world, to the World Wide Web, and do a search out there and figure out the answer and bring me back the answer. If I do it from the work version, it's going to go look at documents that I have inside of my environment. So I'm going to go here and just do a nice little, I'm going to put a prompt in here. This is a very simple prompt. I would recommend to anyone to go out and research prompting and learn more about how to prompt the AI, because that will allow you to have better conversations with AI and you will get better information back from the AI. But this is a very simple prompt. I'm going to tell it to, I'm going to ask it a question. What is a scene? Oops. There we go. Simple, straightforward question. Just going to go ahead and have it run that. And it's going to go out. And like I said, there's this one over here for the web, but there's one here for work. But look what work is going to do for me. Okay, it goes out and says, hey, from your company, I found this information. And then from the web, I found this information. So it actually looked in both places. I would get a definitely different answer if I did it over in web, but when I'm doing it in work, I do get both kind of versions of it. So it's trying to help me out, right? It's trying to figure out how to get me a good answer back. I also have bookmarks in here, or marks inside of here. So it said, hey, there's a document called Scene Understanding inside of here. And this is where I got some information. I'm going to kind of tell you what it says, right? And then it said, I went out to the web and found a bunch of other stuff like some sites out there and such. But look at this reference that it gave me here. It says Scene Understanding, that's the name of the document, and right under it says HS-test. Now, that may be hard for you to see, and I apologize for that, but it says HS-test. And what that is telling me is that this guy has a sensitivity label on it. So because I had a sensitivity label, it felt the responsibility to let me know that that's a sensitive document that it has returned information to me about. And then also down here, you'll see that it says, because any of my information I gave you back was sensitive, I need to alert you to what those sensitivity labels are. And so it's telling me down here saying, hey, HS test is, the sensitivity label HS test is actually inside of here somewhere. So that's pretty cool stuff. We want it to be able to do that. That's what we want out of this environment. That's because I'm using all the pieces of the puzzle to get that together. Now, the search that, or the prompt that I gave it did give me information back, but it gave me a little bit too much information and it's not 100% exactly what I wanted to see. So I'm going to go make this a little bit better for Jared, right? And here's a little bit more advanced technique, right? So I'm going to go over to my Friday site, and inside my Friday site, I have what's called an agent inside of here. So let me just show you how I did that. So I went to any library here. I'll just go to any library. And in my library, I can go up to the top here and just click create agent, and it'll generate a new agent for me and put it inside of here. And it'll call it whatever your library name is, dot agent at the end, right? And so I did that in my Mars classified data up here. And as you'll see, there is a document that it was talking about a minute ago. The scene understanding is actually in here, right? And so let's just say I had 100,000 documents in here, or just a lot of documents. And I wanted to ask this question, but I didn't want it to go look anywhere else in my environment. I just wanted to focus on these documents, right? That's a great thing to be able to do, right? So I'm going to click here on the agent that I created, and this agent will only look at this library for information, right? So that's really cool. So I'll go inside of here. You can do things like summarize all the key highlights from all the documents, or create an FAQ based on all these resources, or how can I use these resources, those types of things. But I'll ask the same question: what is a scene? Okay, and now it's saying, okay, I'm going to go look at this, but I'm only going to look at this library. So I have all these documents inside of here, and it's going to go find the right answer inside of here and give me a nice little answer inside of here. So it says, hey, and you can see this is a little bit more broken down. It's a little bit more descriptive. It's a little bit more responsive. So it is actually giving me information that I'm looking for because it knew exactly where to look, and it didn't have to split its time between, like, is this the answer you wanted, or did you want this other answer? It knows now that this is the right place to go get it. It's more confidence in the answer. That is pretty cool stuff, right? But let's just say that I had a bunch of training classes sitting out here, and I wanted to be able to have someone look through all of our outlines, and then maybe even once they found what they're looking for, register for a class, right? Certainly I could create a bunch of stuff out there for that, like a bunch of forms and all those types of things to do that. But I have this training site here that has training outlines inside of it. And you'll see here, here's a bunch of outlines that I have. I want someone to be able to query this in a normal conversational tone, right, through the AI. And I also have a list of courses out here that are available, that were classes that are available to be taught. And so there are training dates coming up for those. And then I also have a registrations list as well for people who have registered for this class. And as all of you know who have used SharePoint before, I can make a very manual process for this. Hey, what courses do we have that are training outlines do we have around Google Earth? Oh, let me look through here. Oh, great, I see one. Let me open it up and read about it. Da 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 da. Oh, I'd like to see if there's a class for that. Let me go to the courses list. Is there a class for that? Nope, there's not one. Well, maybe I'll just sign up for this SharePoint for beginners thing. So how do I do that? Oh, you got to go over to training registrations and do all of that there. Tavon, can I simplify that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what a lot of organizations are moving towards when it comes to things like this is, hey, can we just have an AI, a little chatbot that can take care of this whole process for us? So, what we went ahead and built for this, excuse me, for this demo is a Copilot agent. This agent, we just called it Spin Training Assistant. You'll see it listed over here. It it does all those things we just talked about. It can go out and it's an expert on our training outlines. It can answer any questions you have about those. It also knows what classes are upcoming. It can tell you about those. And then once you've decided, hey, I'd actually really like to attend one of these classes, it signs you up for it, emails you your confirmation, lets the training department know. It's really taking care of that entire process for you. And this was a relatively, simple example of what an agent can do. These agents that are actually out there doing things for you, I think, are the major focus right now for Microsoft's innovation with Copilot. We're moving into this new wave of automation where we want the AI to act on our behalf and do these things, help us through our processes, and that's really exciting.
So
So
I
here you'll
asked a
find.
simple question. Oh, go ahead, Tavon.
I was just going to talk about what you searched for here. We just asked a simple question about, what training materials do we have for all of the advanced SharePoint courses? And again, this agent is a specialist in our training outlines. So it looked through that library, gave us a nice brief description of each of our more advanced SharePoint courses, like SharePoint for Admins or the Modern Boot Camp. And it broke those down for us with a little bit more information. What we can also do is we can say, hey, training assistant, what classes are actually coming up? I want to register for a class. So now what it's going to do is it's going to go over to that list of upcoming classes. It's going to break down for us. Here are the two that are upcoming right now. You got one for Power BI, one for SharePoint for beginners. Do you want to sign up for one of these? And if we just say, yeah, we'll go ahead and sign up for one, it's going to take care of that whole process for us behind the scenes. Watch this work.
And notice I'm also using plain language here. I just said, sign me up for the SharePoint class. I didn't say sign me up for SharePoint for beginners, right? So you want to think about things like that as well. Like, how does it know exactly what you're looking for? And so inside of here, it gave me the answer. You have been successfully registered for the SharePoint beginners class on May whatever, and feel free to ask if you have any questions. And I'll just jump back over to that training site here and just refresh the training registrations. And you'll see inside of here, I am now registered for this class, and that happened today. That is pretty cool stuff. Uh, Go ahead,
And
Taylor.
again, let me just highlight this is a very simple use case for an agent, right? This is just it can go out and look at this one site to find information, and it can register us for classes by following a very, very standard process. But again, this is a new approach to automation that we're kind of exploring as an industry, and Microsoft wants us to go down. So you can do some pretty advanced things with these, and there's a lot of companies that are building their own agents for Copilot to talk to their other systems. You'll start to find those popping up when you go to add an app as time goes on as well.
Awesome. All right. So we put those slides inside of here so you guys would have a reference for that. We just put kind of some screenshots of what had just happened there or what that agent did, just so you can take that back to work with you.
Those are awesome. Thank you guys. So one more thing again, another thing, before everyone jumps right in and everything like that. Everyone needs to pick their approach. We're going to talk about at the beginning how some folks are ready to jump right in, other folks are a little bit more hesitant, want to take things more slow. Can you guys talk about, kind of the best way to figure out what your approach would be?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen with our clients is kind of, hey, here's a blanket policy. So they send it to their policy program and it writes it out, and everyone in the company has to sign it. It says, we're turning on Copilot for you, and here are the rules to follow. And and I've seen companies that have not done basically any prep, any additional prep whatsoever in their environment before they turn this on. And we have seen some people who have had to kind of step that back a little bit and say, oh, whoa, people are finding all kinds of information here. We kind of want to shut that down. So we have had those stories. Those are actually true stories, and you guys know that. But we have seen where people have just instituted several layers of training, right? And they released like the web version of it for everyone first, and then the policy that went along with that was, please don't put any of our documents in there. Don't upload those, even though it still says that data protection is there. Just don't. That was their rule for doing it. Other rules were things like when you get information back from Copilot, don't just plug that into our materials and then say that that's real and authentic, because it may not be, right? And there's all types of, when I'm getting something from the web that it generated from the web, what's the copyrights on that information? Things like that are just very important to understand. We do have companies like some of you that are here today who basically come into this saying, okay, well, look, I need to make sure that we're doing everything right, that we have it all buttoned up before we release this, because we do have sensitive data, right? The things that we work on are compartmentalized and very sensitive, and we need to make sure that we're dealing with that. So we have seen, that level as well. And what that involves most times is making sure you have data governance in place, and then an AI council of some sort. So governance committee, AI council, whoever's going to fill that role, to actually go through the 61 things that you have to think about prior to turning on, Copilot, or 50 things you have to think about before turning on Copilot. So we find that all that's very, very important. And so you might be at one end of those spectrums or somewhere in between, but just know that everything we've said so far, it absolutely is something proven that benefits your AI. So you can take those and the information we've given you and definitely know that if you apply that, you'll be good. So the Copilot Success Kit, that's Microsoft telling you some of the things that we've told you. We've told you a little bit more, but we advise you to go look at that as well, because that's their impression of what should be there in place. Now, I have friends that work in Microsoft, and the story that I hear out of there is, hey, we are pushing really hard for people to turn on Copilot, and we keep running into companies that are just like, I'm not ready yet. I'm not sure if we're ready. But that's what you're doing now. You're looking at it saying, okay, I'm not sure right now, but let me look at all the aspects that I think I need to look at. And that's where we think you should be. And once you've done that, if you can answer for us, and if you can say, I know what's on every site that we have. If you can say to me, yeah, we're running audits. I know who has access to every site that we have. If you can say to me, yeah, our environment's rich and searchable, if you can say to me all of those things, then I'd say, yeah, you are ready to turn on your Copilot. The last thing that I'd make sure that you understand, though, is this. Go, Tavon.
All right. So it's also very important to know with Copilot and the Microsoft environment overall, it is a growing thing. It is constantly changing. New stuff comes out all the time. You might go in to prepare for a webinar, and suddenly there's an actions button over on the left-hand side of your main screen, which is a true story. Happened to us a couple days ago here. So just bear in mind that Copilot is constantly evolving. It's an area of major investment for Microsoft, and you will find new things. You'll find that things are different today than they will be tomorrow. You'll find something might have broken because it's so cutting edge and it's something that they're still very actively developing. But like I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, this is the direction that they're trying to move us in, and it's the direction the industry kind of accepts.
And you don't have to list them, Tavon, but I mean, I just want to point it out for everybody. Even this morning, prior to this webinar, Tavon received several updates to Copilot, things that are about to come out for Copilot. And I thought just that was interesting. It's a daily thing. So you need to be ahead of the game. And what do you mean by that, Jared? I mean, are you on first ring? Right? There's a way in your environment to make sure that you get changes ahead of everyone else. And so if you're IT related here, I strongly advise that IT is always on first ring, but you may have groups of people also that you might put on first ring so they can get changes in the environment, including Copilot changes ahead of everyone else. And so to do that, I put the instructions inside of here in screenshots. You would go to the admin center. This is an admin, a IT person, obviously. Go to the admin center, click on org settings. Inside of there, you're going to click on org profile. And then inside of there, you're going to click on release preferences, and that's going to get you to this. And from here, right now, what you probably see is that everyone's on standard release. So everybody gets the releases after they've been out for a while. And then you have the two choices here. Put everyone on targeted release. I don't think I would do that. But the last one here, targeted release for selected users, you can choose who gets the targeted releases. And then that way you have someone who's kind of ahead of the curve who's watching out for those things. We think that's also pretty important. So I put a link in here as well for how to do that, just so you know. So what have we talked about today? We've talked about some basic AI governance, all of which we think is important. We've had discussions here about how Copilot interacts with your data and documents, how the information around it should be data classified, and how you should also be using retention inside of there. We talked about red flags, like not having sensitivity turned on inside of your environment, and things that can happen that Copilot can do if you don't have those things in there. We talked about some of the newer benefits and some huge benefits of Copilot AI as well. So with that, I know we're kind of at the end of time, so I'm going to put this slide up so that you can see Kelsey's information. And Kelsey, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Jared said, this is my information. So if you have any questions or anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out. We know that some people have to, go on the hour, which is totally fine. But we'll stay on a couple extra minutes here because we have a couple of questions that I think are good for folks to hear.
And like you said earlier, everyone will get this video, a link to the video, and you'll all get a link to the slides as well. And so the questions we're about to answer will be on the video if you have to go. We want to respect your time.
Yep, absolutely. And then additionally, as well, before we jump into questions, we mentioned a couple other webinars we've done about Copilot, and you can see some of those listed there on the left-hand side. Again, those are on our site where our webinars are, so you can listen to those. They're all free, but they're all really great and talk about a lot of different aspects of using Copilot. So now jumping into questions. Someone asked, does Copilot save and/or store prompts? If so, where is that information found and who can access that history?
So I am so happy that someone asked that question. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I'm just going to go to Copilot here, and I'll call it Copilot Normal. Okay, and I'll put in a prompt. I'll just grab some text here real quick. All right. So I put in that prompt and I asked my question. And my prompts are huge, right? I have very extensive prompts for different things. Like if I'm doing development, I'll write a very big prompt. If I'm doing, research, I'll do a very big prompt for that because I want it to know what I'm looking for. And there are prompting techniques that are out there. We talked about some of those in the other webinars that we have, but there are some very good prompting techniques that are out there. You just go onto social media and look up prompting. Someone will tell you some really good prompting techniques. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put that out there. Once I've done that, then in the environment, I can go to my prompt, wait for it. There we go. I can hover over my prompt, and right up here, you'll see I can edit it, I can copy it, or I can save the prompt. And when I save it, okay, it'll ask me, the dialogue's changed a little bit, Tavon. So this change happened this morning, my friends. Okay, what normally happens, or what some of you will see, it'll open up the prompt center, and then at the top, you'll have to click on My Prompts or Saved Prompts so that you can enter in this information, right? But I would go in and just say what give it a new name if I wanted to. I'm okay with this name. I do take time to name my prompts, and then I would go ahead and save that. And where that shows up is here under View Prompts. So some of you are still, when you click on Save a Prompt, it's going to bring you here first, and you'll have to click on your prompts to be able to see it, and then you can rename it and do all those types of things. But I like the new way because I always prefer it to. I would like to do what it's doing now, so that's kind of cool. But there it is. That's how you save a prompt, and that is super important because you want to be able to. If your job is to do research online, I want to have a prompt set up that always gives me really accurate information, or I want to be able to share prompts with other people. I want to be able to say, hey, Tavon, I have this really good prompt. It really works well for me, and I want to be able to share some of that out there with him. Great question.
Awesome. Another good question we had is if Copilot creates a graphic like our happy little traffic light, does that go out to a larger public domain?
That is a great question.
That is a very good question. I'm going to go with I don't believe so. However, that's one piece of the documentation that I would need to honestly study up on a little bit more is what does it do after it generates that image for you? Microsoft has a lot of very in-depth articles about everything that Copilot does and how it operates. So I'm sure that they would have some documentation about that that we can take a look for.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's using Dolly behind the scenes for that. And so it's actually reaching out from one AI to another AI to generate that for you. And that's the only reason I have pause. If you had asked me just about regular information, I'd have said no, but I don't know with that image. That's a great, great, great question, one we should look up to see it. I will say this, though. If someone else goes and asks for exactly the same thing, it's unlikely that they're going to get the same thing that we had. So I prize that image that we created because I feel like it's very unique and going to be for us. If you try to go run the same prompt to try to get that same thing with Dolly, it doesn't really generate the same thing a second time. So I don't know, maybe take that and do with that what you will.
Okay, another question we had is could Copilot become a help desk? Answer questions, ask questions, get them answered, and slash or create tickets?
Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of what we were, showing some of the concept of with our training assistant. But that I think is one of the most what's going to be popular use cases for these agents is have a version of Copilot that's really trained up on your policies or how you work as a business. Let people ask it whatever questions they want, and if they need to submit a ticket, have that as an option for them. That can absolutely happen.
So imagine having that IT site set up for that, right? Where you have a library of FAQs, right? And when someone asks a question, it searches through those FAQs, or maybe even a lessons learned, or it searches through all of those things, right? Then when it answers a question and the person is satisfied, so you can prompt them, hey, did this actually answer your question? And they say yes, then you could actually have a workflow behind that that actually sends that over for review by your team. And then your team looks at it and says, oh, that actually should be in an FAQ, more concise FAQ or something like that. And you could have it generate those things. So you could have it really operate that whole system for you, and that is super cool. Bots could do that before, but now with Copilot sitting in there to actually give that humanized conversation piece of it, I think the answer is 100% yes.
Okay, awesome. I think that's about all the time we have for questions. But again, if we didn't get your questions answered or you come up and think of more, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. When we send you these slides, you'll have my contact information there, so you're more than welcome to reach out. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you guys next time.
Awesome.